Hello friends, here I am with a new video, and today we are going to deal with a topic from poetry. And today in this video we will see what is sonnet. Sonnet is a type of poetry or a form of poetry, and we are going to explore the form of sonnet in this video. So let's begin our video. So this is the introductory slide, and we will first see the introduction as we usually do. So if we look at the word poet, first of all, then it comes from a Greek word that is poetes, which in English means creator. So a poet is known as a creator, and the reason behind it is a creator is someone who can create something, and a poet is known as creator because poet can create a whole new world with the help of his imagination. So a poet is known as a creator because he can create a new world with the help of his imagination, with the help of his feelings, with the help of his emotions, and so on. So first of all, the first point is we will just look about what exactly poetry is. We will not directly see the form of sonnet, but first we will see what is poetry, and then we will explore sonnet. So poetry is one of the earliest or oldest form in literature. It has its origin in prehistoric times. So if we talk about poetry, then in literature, poetry is one of the oldest forms, right? We know that in literature there are various genres, where there are various forms such as novel, novella, short story, essays. So poetry or poem is one of the earliest or the oldest form, and it is the origins of it can be found in prehistoric times, in ancient times. The reason behind it is given in the second point. In the old times, people used poetic language, rhythmical tone, and singing along with the musical instrument. So in the ancient time, what people used to do is they used to have a kind of poetic language, rhyming language, the words which are rhythmical in tone, and they used to sing it, and along with that they used to play musical instrument. So slowly and gradually this process of singing some rhythmical words, rhyming words, and using poetical language developed later on in the form of poetry, and that's why today we have certain poems or poetry. The third point is thus poetry existed in the oral form before the invention of writing. Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the earliest poems in existence. So if we see, as I told earlier, that poetry also can be seen in the prehistoric times or in the ancient time. So before the invention of writing, poetry existed, and poetry existed in the form of oral literature. It was passed down orally, verbally from generations to generations, and gradually after the invention of writing, people maintained the record of poetry, and today we have poetry in the form of book or in a published form. If we trace back the origins of poetry or the first or the earliest poem, then according to the research, Epic of Gilgamesh, this is the title of the poem. Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the earliest poems in existence, right? So according to the researchers, according to the scholars, they believe that Epic of Gilgamesh is one of the earliest poem which existed. But according to William J. Long, if we see from the book History of English Literature written by William J. Long, then Beowulf is considered to be the first poem in English literature. So there are various opinions, but these are certain factual details which you need to just memorize. So yes, so these are certain definitions of poetry. So what exactly poetry is, and these are the definitions given by certain critics, certain poets, and the first definition is the most famous one, right? Poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. So this definition is given by the famous romantic poet, that is William Wordsworth, and according to him, poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Spontaneous means which comes suddenly, and it is the overflow of feelings, overflow of powerful feelings, powerful emotions, and it takes its origins from emotions recollected in tranquility. So let's say, for example, if a person is having a memory or a past experience, and if that person is sitting alone in a peaceful atmosphere or in tranquility, and when this memories or this experience is recollected, and when a person notes down or writes it down, then it can be considered as poetry. This is what William Wordsworth believed. It is a spontaneous overflow, all of a sudden overflow of powerful feelings, and it comes back when a person's mind is in peace, when person is sitting in tranquility, and those emotions, those peaceful experience is recollected. It comes forth in the mind. So that is what poetry is. The second definition is poetry is an interpretation of life through imaginations and feelings. This is given by William Henry Hudson. He was a critic. So according to him, poetry is an interpretation of life. With the help of poetry, one can understand life, the human behavior, human life through imagination and feelings, right? And many poets, we know that how poets write poetry, as we said earlier, that poet is the creator, and poet creates poems through the help of imaginations. So poetry is an interpretation of life. Poetry helps one to understand the life, the human behavior, human life with the help of imaginations and feelings. This is what William Henry Hudson believed, W.H. Hudson. The third definition is poetry is a musical thought according to Thomas Carlyle. This is the definition given by Thomas Carlyle. And poetry is a musical thought. Why musical thought? Because poetry is mostly written in rhyming words. There are certain rhyming words, musical pattern into the poetry in a poem, and that's why Thomas Carlyle says that it is a musical thought. And according to Edgar Allan Poe, the last definition, poetry is the rhythmic creation of beauty. So you will find the third and fourth definition quite similar. And it is also the same. Poetry is the rhythmical creation of beauties. It is a creation, recreation of something which is beautiful, but in a rhythmical manner or in musical manner. So these are the four definitions given by certain writers, certain poets and critics, right? So now moving on. Okay, these are various genres, various types of poetry. When we say that there are certain types of poetry, then it follows a certain structure. So I have just listed down some of the most famous types, some of the most famous genres of poetry. The first is sonnet, the second is ode, ballad, elegy, lyric, epic, haiku, epistle. Poetry and its type is not limited to this, but I have just kept various and many famous types of poetry, right? So in this video we will see what sonnet is. We will see the definition of sonnet and what is the structure of the sonnet, right? But this is just for your extra information. These are certain types of poetry. Okay, so now we will dive into what is a sonnet. Sonnet is a poetical form. It is a form of poetry. So let's begin by the first point. Sonnet is a 14-line melodious lyric and musical poem traditionally written in iambic pentameter. So sonnet has 14 lines. So when we talk about sonnet, the type of poetry sonnet, then it has a fixed lines, and sonnet always has 14 lines, and it is melodious, as we saw in the earlier definitions of poetry, that it is a musical thought, rhythmical thought, right? So sonnet is also 14-line poem which is melodious, lyric and musical poem, and it is traditionally written in iambic pentameter. Now iambic pentameter is a kind of poetic measuring tool, we can say, poetic structure in which a definite structure in which a poem is written. So it will take a whole another video to explain iambic pentameter, but we can understand that is a regulation, it is a kind of rule. Iambic pentameter is a kind of a meter in which sonnet is written. Iambic pentameter which has 5 groups of unstressed and stressed syllables, right? So it will take whole new video, but you have to just remember that sonnet is traditionally written in a meter, in a definite structure, that is iambic pentameter. So when we talk about sonnet, what exactly sonnet is, then in simple lines, it is a melodious poem, it is a lyrical musical poem which has 14 lines, not less than 14 lines, not more than 14 lines, and it is always written in a definite structure, that is iambic pentameter. Second point, the sonnet form of poetry was invented by Giacomo da Lentini around 13th or 14th century in Italy, and it was popularized by Francisco Petrarch. So when we talk about the invention of sonnet, Then an Italian poet, that is Giacomo da Lentini, he invented the sonnet form of poetry around 13th or 14th century. There is no definite date, but it is believed that it is invented around 13th century, and it was made famous, it was made popularized by another Italian poet, a very famous Italian poet, that is Francisco Petrarch. So Giacomo da Lentini is the inventor of sonnet form, and Francisco Petrarch is the person who made it famous, who made or popularized the sonnet form. So Petrarch published a sequence of love sonnet addressed to a woman named Laura. So how Petrarch made this sonnet form popular? He wrote a series of poems that was titled as love sonnet, which was addressed, which was you can say written for a woman. Maybe we can assume that that woman would be his beloved, named Laura. So Petrarch wrote a sequence of poems, that is love sonnet, a series, more than one sonnet, a series, a couple of sonnets, and it was addressed, it was written for a woman named Laura, and this Laura could be his beloved. Further point, next point, sonnet always has rhyming words at the end of each lines. Yes, so when we talk about the rhyming words, we earlier discussed that so poem has rhyming words, rhythmical tone, musical tone. So rhyming words can be either in the beginning part, in the middle of the sentence, or at the end of the lines, right? So in sonnet, mostly it is seen that sonnet has rhyming words at the end of the line. It is not in the beginning part, it is not in the middle part, but mostly it is at the end of each line, right? So you have to remember this. The word or term sonnet has been derived from the Italian word sonetto, which in English means little song. So if we see the etymology means the origin of the study of the origin of words. So if we see from where the word sonnet came, then the English word sonnet came from the Italian word, that is sonetto, and it in English means a little song. And as we know that sonnet or poem is musical in tone, it is rhythmical in tone, it has rhyming words in it, and for that reason the name is given as little song. And it is small, it is not long, it is little, because it only has 14 lines in it, and that's why it is known as little song or sonnet. It came from the Italian word sonetto. Though sonnet was invented in Italy, it was later on spread throughout England and Europe. Okay, as we seen earlier that Italian writer Giacomo da Lentini invented sonnet in Italy, and it was made famous by Petrarch. But as it was an Italian invention, it does not limit itself to Italy, but it spread, it became famous throughout England, throughout Europe, and today we study it throughout the world. So any good thing, if you write any good thing, then it would always become famous. It would not be limited to your country, but it would spread across the globe. So that is how sonnet became very much famous, and today we are studying it in our English literature, introduction to poetry, right? So when we talk about types of sonnet, so there are two major types, but there are also certain subparts. So if I say that there are two major types, that is Shakespearean sonnet and Petrarchian sonnet, but various other critics, various other researchers also believe that there are other three types. So these are the five types of sonnet, that is Shakespearean sonnet, which is also known as English sonnet, because Shakespeare was from England, and he wrote sonnets in English language. And it is also known as Elizabethan sonnet, because Shakespearean wrote sonnet in the rule or in the reign of Queen Elizabeth. So Shakespearean sonnet is also known as English sonnet or Elizabethan sonnet. Second is Petrarchian sonnet. As we seen earlier that Francisco Petrarch made the sonnet form very famous, and he himself wrote a series of love sonnet which was addressed to a woman named Laura. And he also wrote certain sonnets which are known as Petrarchian sonnet, and it is also known as Italian sonnet, because Petrarch was from Italy and he was an Italian poet, and that's why it is known as Italian sonnet. Third is Spenserian sonnet. It is named after the famous English poet Edmund Spenser. Fourth is Miltonic sonnet, named after John Milton, and the fifth one is Curtal sonnet. So this is all about sonnet, and thank you for watching my video. In this video I have just briefly made you aware what exactly sonnet is. Later on we will discuss in detail about the types of the sonnet. Thank you for watching my video.